Welcome to PhilSci Hub Research University, your ultimate guide on your next research project.
We will lay down the best practices in research ideation, literature review, experimental design, and data analysis to guide you as you carry out your research project. Learn from the PhilSci Hub team of research scientists and some invited subject matter experts. PhilSci Hub Research University will be your personal coach through every stage of your research project, from ideation to final assessment.
And the best part, it's absolutely free.
Visit us at philscihub.com and be part of this learning journey.
Good grammar and spelling are important. But if you
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Welcome to the Filipino Science Hub. Box or YouTube live comments, and we will try to accommodate as much questions as possible. After the talk, we will welcome to the Filipino Science Hub. Thank you for your continued support to this online platform. To our new participants, thank you for checking us out today, and we would like to officially welcome you to the PhilSci Hub family. Before we start the webinar, I would like to share some house rules in order to facilitate a smooth session for everyone. For our Zoom participants, we would appreciate it if you could turn your audio and video cameras off during the webinar. If you have questions or comments, feel free to type them on our Zoom chat box or YouTube live comments, and we will try to accommodate as much questions as possible. After the talk, we will have a 30-minute Q&A where the Zoom participants will have the opportunity to ask their questions live. We would also like to request for everyone to not record the webinar. The full video of the session will be posted on our official YouTube channel. For those who would like to receive a certificate of participation, a Google Form link will be posted on our Zoom chat box, YouTube live comments, and YouTube video description towards the end of the webinar. Please make sure you enter the correct information, especially your email address, to ensure receipt of the certificate. Also, for you to obtain the certificate, you will need to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as follow us on Facebook. For those who are new and may not be familiar with who we are and what we do, allow me to share our mission and vision in the next few minutes. Filipino Science Hub is an online platform founded by our CEO, Filipino scientist, Dr. Jeffrey Bunkin, back in 2012. Currently, we are a registered nonprofit organization based in Houston, Texas, United States. Our mission is to promote STEM education and the culture of research among students and teachers in the Philippines and abroad. Our current global leadership team is comprised of volunteer Filipino scientists, seasoned STEM educators, and business executives across the globe. Our vision is to see a technology and innovation-driven Philippines, and we believe that this can be achieved by creating a new generation of well-rounded Filipino STEM enthusiasts. This vision is being carried out via our two major programs, the PhilSci Hub Ed program and the PhilSci Hub Research University. Through PhilSci Hub Ed, we are able to empower and support our teachers when it comes to strengthening STEM fundamentals education. We believe that this is important because the more equipped our STEM educators are, the more they can inspire our students to pursue a career in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The other major program that drives our vision forward is CIFFSH Research University, where we provide tools for fundamentals of research and bring practicing scientists closer to the educational sector. In a 2018 UNESCO study, the Philippines recorded 189 scientists, in contrast to the much-needed 380 in a million ideal ratio. So in other words, we need more scientists. So what is our strategy? At CIFFSH, we believe that empowering the STEM practitioners and education leaders can result in a huge impact, not only in the present time, but also in the years to come. Imagine we have 35,000 academic frontliners fully equipped to teach 30 students a year. The result? 31.5 million students impacted after 30 years. So by 2050, we would have produced 315,000 scientists, which translates to 1,900 scientists per million Filipinos. As they say, start them young. Filipino Science Hub Ed provides STEM interests and competencies from start to finish with the goal of increasing the number of students specializing in STEM. CIFFSH Hub Ed provides advanced programs to ensure that the STEM educators are equipped in the coming years. To quote Henry Adams, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. At CIFFSH Hub Ed, we believe in STEM teacher development as foundational to a better STEM education. So what we see as deterrents to these projects are the lack of mastery in STEM topics and non-STEM majors teaching the subject. CIFFSH Hub Ed breaks the barrier by democratizing STEM topics and discussing them in Taglish. Through the CIFFSH Hub Ed program, we have been able to form partnerships with major educational organizations. We are partnered with the best of the best in the industry with a pilot program catering to grades 3 and 7 educators this year. When it comes to teachers training, we also have been able to partner with the experts in the field. Through this partnership, we were able to provide pedagogical courses and innovative STEM teaching tools taught by educational leaders and practicing scientists. This coming together of these two groups in one training program is what we consider a paradigm shift. By providing modern approaches and tools for STEM teaching, we believe that more educators will be adept at teaching STEM fundamentals. CIFFSH Hub Ed has also collaborated with high school and college students through our internship program. So far, our interns have created supplemental learning materials and informational videos on TikTok. The MELX-based modules in general science, biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics have been created by a team of math and science teaching majors from UPLB. These modules are audiovisuals, which can serve as learning guides, visual aids, problem sets, and tutorials. Another project completed through the CIFFSH Hub Ed program is the partnership with Ateneo Chemistry Society Build a Lab program. This produced grade 9 chemistry modules and distributed to Ernesto Rondon High School and Carlos B. Garcia High School, with approximately 1,000 student beneficiaries. Through partnerships with like-minded organizations, we have expanded our reach not only in the Philippines, but also across the globe. As the acronym for TEAM goes, together, everybody achieves more. And so, as mentioned earlier, the other driving force at PhilSci Hub is the PhilSci Hub Research University. This is where we provide free courses on fundamentals of scientific research, such as research ideation, literature review, how to write a research proposal, how to communicate your research work to the scientific community, among others. This year alone, over 1,300 takers completed the training program. We also provide special topics webinar where practicing scientists share their technical expertise and their career experiences. We believe that this closer contact with scientists will help students become more aware of the STEM careers available for them and realize how important these careers are for the advancement of the society around it. Up to date, we have been able to reach over 73,000 students and teachers all over the world. We have hosted 52 webinars, which translates to 128 hours of STEM expertise rendered, and 73,318 equivalent training hours. We have been able to gather a community of volunteer STEM experts to inspire the younger generation. We know that this platform will continue to grow, and this is why we are all excited on what is in store here at PhilSci Hub. Our official website is www.philscihub.com. This is where you can access all our materials such as webinars, tutorials, modules, virtual lab, and features. We are also present in several social media platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. So follow us wherever you are most active on to get updated with our web events. So again, thank you for being with us this morning. And to officially start our webinar, I would like to turn the virtual floor over to our host for today.
Okay, magandang umaga sa ating mga participants dito sa Pilipinas. And to those who are joining us from other parts of the world, good afternoon or good evening to all of you. So I am Karen Lacerna, a member of PhilSci Hub, of the PhilSci Hub family, and also an equipment specialist of the DLSU University Central Instrumentation Facility. So we are in our second webinar of the DLSU CIF-PhilSci Hub webinar series on modern analytical methods. And today we will be hearing from my colleague, Dr. Jose Esmeria Jr. or si Sir Doc Jojo, and he will be talking about the fundamentals of scanning electron microscopy. But before that, before we start Doc Jojo's talk, we have here Dr. Drexel H. Camacho, Scientific Director of the De La Salle University Central Instrumentation Facility, to provide an overview of the research and analytical capabilities of CIF and to talk about our partnership with PhilSci Hub in this webinar series. So, good morning, Drexel, Sir Drexel. Good morning po. And again, sir, thank you for allowing us to participate in this webinar series. So without your generous support, wala po kami dito. So thank you, sir.
Okay, so good morning, and we're happy to partner with PhilSci Hub, and indeed we share the same plan and the same dream of PhilSci Hub to have the critical mass of scientists from the Philippines who are active in research, and therefore the activities of PhilSci Hub really jives with what we're doing. So we are from De La Salle University, a private university based in Manila, and one of the office in the DLSU is called the Central Instrumentation Facility, of which Dr. Karen Lacerna and Dr. Jose Esmeria belongs. Okay, so I'm gonna share with you some of our capabilities because we believe that after all your basic training you've done in fields I guess it's time to move up into the level of the kind of research that is needed, and therefore get your hands dirty in a way and do some laboratory activities, because that's what science is all about. So it's important to have the basics, but also we should also be able to do hands-on activities and doing actual research in the laboratory, and we can be your partner in that aspect. So the De La Salle University Central Instrumentation Facility is a facility under the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation of De La Salle University. We are located in DLSU Laguna campus, which is technically located in Binyan, Laguna, but you can go through the Santa Rosa city. And this is another perspective of our building, which is beside the oval, and which is good for us because if we're doing experiments, we can just run around the oval. And if our experiments fail, we can run around the oval. And if our experiments become successful, then we can run around the oval. But yes, it's a scenic place. There's a lot of spaces there yet. And we invite you to visit our facility if the COVID situation permits. Now, these are the people that work full-time in the Central Instrumentation Facility. So we have here Dr. Karen Lacerna, and of course, our speaker today, Dr. Jose Esmeria. And I guess last time, Christian Argamino gave a talk. And of course, the rest will also have their appointed time with PhilSci-Hub. And watch out for their talks. And we're supported by faculty members from chemistry, physics, biology, and engineering for our activities. And these are our full-time technicians doing actual laboratories in the lab. So what do we do in the Central Instrumentation Facility? Basically, we manage the high-end equipment for research. Now, take note, all of these equipment are funded by De La Salle University. So it's a private university's initiative, and our small effort in building up the capability of the Filipinos to do elegant research. So one of the instruments that we have, okay, is called a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. And some of you may not, because of the term nuclear, don't worry, it's safe to do this kind of instrumentation for your research. So what this instrumentation, this nuclear magnetic or NMR laboratory is now officially called the Dr. Consolacion Y. Ragasa NMR Laboratory, who unfortunately passed away last April due to COVID-19, but she is the foremost prolific researcher in natural products in the Philippines. So the NMR is, based for those who are not familiar, is an instrument used for structure elucidation or identification of compounds. So if you seen the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, they synthesize compounds using asymmetric organocatalysts. Now, in order to confirm whether the structure indeed is really the correct structure, then we use NMR to confirm that. There's only two ways to confirm a chemical structure of a compound. One is the single crystal X-ray technique, but the problem with that is that your sample needs to be a crystal. But most organic compounds, or most compounds, are in the form of powder, oil, and cannot be crystallized. So therefore, the only way to determine the atom by atom connection of the structure is through the nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. So the NMR at DLSU is a 600 megahertz NMR. And we have two kinds of probes, the liquid probe and the solid probe. That means we can analyze sample in solution and in solid. And we can do variable temperatures from -100 to 150 degrees Celsius. And we can do multi-nuclei observation. Aside from the usual proton and carbon NMR, we can analyze fluorine, NMR, phosphorus, silicon, and so on. Okay, so this is the instrument necessary for confirming the structure of your compound. Then, of course, the laboratory or the center is supported by other instrumentations. The chromatography laboratory is equipped with the LCMS QTOF. So basically, in layman's term, this is an instrument used for separation of compounds. So if you synthesize materials, then there are a lot of mixtures in there, or from nature, it's composed of mixtures of compounds. So you have to isolate them so that you will be able to identify and characterize these compounds. And it's also an equipment used for metabolomic studies, the replication studies of natural compounds, and there's a lot of capabilities. And this is, so you can notice, it is a tandem equipment with a mass spec. Okay, so therefore we can determine not only separate the compounds, but we can determine the molecular weight of the compound. And we also have what you call the semi-preparative HPLC, and this is also an instrumentation for separation of compounds. The good thing about this one is that we can actually collect the sample and be able to do further analysis of the separated compound. And we do have analytical instrument, again, used for separation of compounds. And this is also equipped with GPC, or gel permeation chromatography, or otherwise known as size exclusion chromatography, where we can separate polymeric materials here and characterize the molecular weight of the compound. And we do have GCMS with headspace, and this is an instrument used for analytical separation of volatile compounds. The spectroscopy laboratory, which I guess Christian Argamino discussed about last time, we do have an FTIR, or Fourier transform infrared spectrometer. This one contains with an ATR attachment, and basically this instrument is used for functional group characterization in materials and in compounds. And we do have the Malvern Zeta Sizer nano analyzer, so that we'll be able to analyze the particle size through dynamic light scattering, the zeta potential to determine the stability of compound in solution, and of course microrheology to determine consistency of your mixture. And we do have UV-vis spectrometer, but this is not the usual UV-vis you're familiar with, because we're familiar with UV-vis, where we put our sample in a cuvette in solution and place this inside the spectrometer. But our equipment is equipped with specular reflectance attachment, so that we can analyze large samples as well as solid samples and films and glasses. And if you have some coatings on your glasses, we can analyze the amount of UV absorptions in there. We also have an elemental analyzer. This is a very important instrument to determine and confirm really the structure of our compound by determining the percentage of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, chlorine. And if you're reporting novel compound, and this elemental analyzer or elemental analysis is essential information that you should report. And we do have ICP-MS, which is used to analyze metals at the ppb level. And for those researchers who would like to prepare their sample on site, then we have a room dedicated for sample preparation laboratory, where we have the usual freeze dryer, rotary evaporator, water purificator, sonicator bath, sonicator probe, balances, ovens, refrigerators, and so on. Okay, so the basic needs and glasswares, okay, of researchers who would like to prepare their samples on site. The theme or the topic for today is, so Dr. Esmeria, we're gonna talk later, is in this room called the Integrated Electron Microscopy Laboratory. So the CIF is equipped with the scanning electron microscope, which basically allows us to image nanomaterials or materials in the nanoscale. And it's very important for studies in materials. And we do have what you call the focused ion beam, which allows us to manipulate nanomaterials so that we'll be able to mill and polish material or metal, and then we can do that here in this instrument. And we do have the transmission electron microscope, Again, this is even more powerful than SEM, and it allows us to image nanomaterials and also cells. So we cater also to clients in the hospitals who would like to see the image of the cells. And that the electron microscopy laboratory is equipped with paraphernalia or other instruments for sample preparation. So we do have the spatter coater to coat your sample if your sample is non-conductive. And we do have an ultra microtome. This one is allowing us to prepare samples because in order to load it in the TEM, you need an ultra thin sample, and this ultra microtome instrument will allow you to do that. And then we have this Access Pro micro manipulator. This is also for sample preparation. If you would like to pick up one lamellae or one nanomaterial from your sample and load it in the stage of TEM, then you will be able to do that here in micromanipulator. Another laboratory that we have is called the iCell, or imaging laboratory for cells. And our instrument, which has just been installed there, is called the confocal laser scanning microscope. This one allows us to image the cell live. That means we can do live cell imaging, and these are very important instrument for studies of interaction of material or drugs in the cell, and you will be able to know which part of the cell the drug goes or the nanomaterial goes, and then whatever happens to the cell, we can visualize that one here. And this center or this laboratory is also equipped with a cytogenetics workstation so that we can assess whether a certain drug or a certain material is toxic or not. And these are also equipped with cell culture labs for culturing bacterial cell, mammalian cell, and plant cells. So basically, we can do a full course of studies of preparation of materials and interaction of materials with biological systems. In the engineering side, we do have what you call the wind tunnel facility, which allows us to simulate, do simulations of wind direction for studies in aerodynamics, aeronautics, environmental modeling, weather simulations, and so on. So these are, I guess this is one of the first kind in the country which allows us to do some simulation studies for involving air. So what we do, we support the conduct of research. So again, to be able to be a real scientist, you should be able to do actual research. And in order to do that, okay, you have to go to the laboratory, go to work on the bench, and be able to really analyze your samples. And we are here to support whatever endeavor you might have in your research activities, because we accept samples for analysis. We also accept requests for training, and we also do collaboration with researchers. If you need consultation, we can offer that consultation services with you. If you need your research to be outsourced, but this one, we reserve this for the industry who would like to have their research outsourced to us. So other activities that we do is we support graduate research by allowing them to stay on campus and of course, and reside and be a resident researcher doing their thesis. And we train them on the instrument, and we allow them to have access to the instrument 24/7. And so far, this program is only limited to graduate students enrolled at De La Salle University at that thesis stage. We are planning to expand this to external student researchers, and we cater to graduate researchers for now. Because of their maturity, and of course, we don't need to guide them on a daily basis. And we are looking for some funding so that we can support other graduate students from other universities to reside and work on their thesis on campus. And we do have a program called the Toklas Tunas Fellowship, which is training program that involves lectures as well as hands-on on the use of the equipment specifically for discovering drugs from natural sources. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, the first batch of the class known as fellows was done with the lecture, which was done online, and we're looking forward for the second part of this training where we bring them on campus so that they can do actual research using the instruments available on campus. And we do host Balik Scientists, and I guess some of you may have joined one of the sessions which we hosted for the lectures of Dr. Leonel Santos. And this year we hosted Dr. Ana Karen Lacerna as a Balik Scientist, and fortunately we were able to hire her at the Central Instrumentation Facility. And again, what we do, we serve faculty researchers, first and foremost for faculty researchers from De La Salle University, and faculty research groups come to us, and so that they will be able to, so that we can serve their research needs. And we serve the instrumentation class for our BS students. We allow them to have hands-on and use of the instrument actual, and we conduct a student training in-house from the students of De La Salle University, and we do also accept requests for training from other universities for certain fee. And of course, we allow our graduate students to have hands-on instrumentation used for equipment, and we support student researchers from the BS, MS, PhD, and we also allow OJT. Here, this is a batch of Philippine Science High School students who did their science immersion program with us. So if you're planning to have your OJT, please do contact us. And we support our researchers from other universities. These are the group of DOSC scholars, the MS level from MSU IIT, who visited us and sent their sample for analysis. And I guess 4 of them were able to graduate because of the analysis that were done at CIF. We do research collaboration from researchers and institutes in the Philippines and abroad. And we do conduct seminars. This was pre-pandemic. This is just a day before the lockdown announcement where we had the seminar by Dr. Leonel Santos. And after that, all our webinars are done online. And we have a series called Trends and Approaches in Analytical Science. And watch out for our announcement for the next installment of this seminar. And the last one that we had is the metabolomics approach, where Dr. Karen Lacerna was the main speaker. And it was divided into 3 days because of the complexity of the topics. And there's a lot of people who joined us actually. And we do conduct training, laboratories for safety, for laboratories, and a lot of webinars. And this is the one in partnership with PhilSci Hub. And we're happy with PhilSci Hub's partnership so that we will be able to support indeed the need of the Philippines for serious researchers. And we also support sustainability, the goals, sustainability goals. So we offer the services at CIF for sustainability research. And we do conduct niche workshops. Specifically in this case, we cater to specific topic related to industry needs. Okay? And there are requests for training. So this one requests training from faculty from Batangas State University. This one from for the students of Cagayan State University in lieu of their OJT. And another one from the Philippine Cultural College. We also provided a series of sessions, and we serve the research needs of the industry. And they come to us and ask help for their problems in the industry. So please follow us in our social media accounts. So we have an account on Facebook. We have 2 accounts. Just type DLSU Central Instrumentation Facility for generic announcements about the facility, and specific for NMR, we do have another Facebook account, the DLSU NMR Laboratory. And we also have a YouTube account where our webinars are uploaded online, and you can also learn on your own from the uploaded materials. And since we're located in Laguna, and since we have, if every time we have a visitor, so we also serve kind of a tourist attraction whenever there are visitors in DLSU, and they bring them to us. Okay, and these are alumni, these are students from Japan who visited us, and of course we are visited also by national scientists and academicians, and they're impressed with the move of DLSU to provide high advanced equipment to support research needs, not only within the university but also outside. So we welcome you to partner with us. If you need help, please email us for our generic email, cif@dlsu.edu.ph. Our website is still being built, but our website for NMR is already available and up. You can search DLSU NMR Laboratory, and you will be able to see the details of how to prepare the sample, how much is the analysis, and so on. So I guess with that, thank you so much for sharing, allowing us to share our humble facility, and take note that we welcome any partnership with you. But I just would like to give a disclaimer that whenever you come to us, please be knowledgeable on the topic, because there's a lot of clients that we have, and there are people who come to us just bringing just bringing plants and ask us to analyze the samples. We don't do that. Okay, what we do is you prepare the samples. That's where scientists are. That's what scientists are doing, and we can help you in the analysis part. So you have to do your part as a researcher, and we are going to help you in the analysis part. I guess that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Drexel, for that very comprehensive overview of your facility. I'm sure po marami pa po kayong matutulungan in the future po. And I just want to acknowledge our live participants. We have around 250 participants po right now, and maraming pa pong nagjo-join in. So again, maraming salamat po, Sir Drexel, for your openness sa partnership na to. And so this morning, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Jose Esmeria Jr. So he is currently an equipment specialist in the Integrated Electron Microscopy Laboratory at De La Salle University Laguna campus. And prior to that, he was a senior manager at TDK Philippines Corporation. So he got his Doctor of Philosophy in Physics from De La Salle University and master's degree in Electronics Engineering at Tohoku University of Sendai, Japan. His research interests include electron microscopy, contact electrification and its applications for triboelectric nanogenerators, laser design, and nonlinear optics. His instrumentation expertise include field emission scanning electron microscope, or SEM, energy dispersive spectrometer, EDS, transmission electron microscope, or TEM, focused ion beam, or FIB. Also, he is an expert in morphological and compositional imaging at the micro and nano levels. So without further ado, we turn the virtual floor over to Dr. Jojo, and let's give him a warm Philsahab welcome. So Sir Jo, take it away po.
Thank you, Ms. Dindy, for that introduction. So I'll share my screen right now. Okay, So good morning. Can you hear me? Can everybody
Yes,
hear me
sir.
now?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we can.
Okay. Can you see the screen already?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So good morning. So uh, for this time, we're going to discuss about the fundamental of scanning electron microscopy. So just to give you everybody an overview, how does an SEM work? Okay. So before we go to the fundamental of scanning electron microscopy, we start with the about microscopy. It is a field that uses microscope and it aids identifying, analyzing an object which cannot be seen by an unaided eye. So microscope originated from the Latin word microscopium, okay, or to see something small, to get an aid, how to see something. And we use a microscope to study microscopic objects, which is not visible to our eye. And because of that, we want to see something more, okay, from that object, more details. And because of that, if we want to see more details, we want to study its morphology, its topography, the surface, its structures. So that's why we get into microscopy. In microscopy, what is important, one of the things that we need to learn is something about magnification. So magnification is just a ratio of the image size over the actual size. The first thing we do as a child, okay, in our childhood days, if we are curious about something, let's say an ant walking on the ground, if we want to see something on the stone or something, or in the flowers, we use a magnification glass. So we magnify something, an object, in order to see the greater details beyond our naked eye. Okay. So magnification really depends on the structure of your lens, okay, which is the focal length, it's also the radius, diameter, etc., etc. But our eye has limitations. Okay, our naked eye, as much as far as we know, for those good eyes, we can comprehend or see something as small as 0.68 millimeters. Okay, but we can comprehend every day is that we can see, okay, a human being from one distance, our hand, and then later we can also see the fingerprints. Okay, and if we need to see something in details, okay, we use a magnifying glass in order to aid us, okay, to see something. Beyond that, okay, beyond 1 millimeter, okay, unless you're Superman, okay, you need a microscope to see something. Let's say a microscopic animal like a tardigrade, okay, it's a this is a one way of analyzing like biological samples or microscopic animals, and we can see the details more for our human hair, just like unlike seeing it just strands. And of course, you can see, okay, both biologists, medical technologies use this as a tool for studying blood cells and other biological and pathological samples. Beyond 1 micron, so you can see from this scale, okay, if you want to see something more in the detail, you go into electron microscopy. And one of that is the scanning electron microscope. In the optical microscope, you can only see the structure of the tardigrade, the transparent in a live scene. But if you want to see how does this tardigrade, this little water bear, really looks like, okay, you need the scanning electron microscope, and there's a special preparation for that. And also, the scanning electron microscope aids us in identifying bacteria. And also in the industry, it's currently being used to analyze failures, okay, in integrated circuits. It's a very useful for quality control. Now, If we want to see something far smaller, okay, more details, okay, we go into transmission electron microscope, which is also part of electron microscopy. Here we can see the structure of a crystal, a DNA, and of course, the only way to see COVID-19, which is a diameter of 100 nanometers, is to use this instrument. And of course, this instrument is also capable of showing you the lattice structure as well as the electron diffraction of your crystal. So as we go on smaller into the microscopic world or beyond that, okay, electron microscope is the tool for analyzing things in this submicroscopic world. Now, first, before into going analyzing something, if we want to analyze a material, we need to stimulate it. Okay, stimulation can be a form of visible light, just like you, me. I have my naked eye and I can see something. Okay, I have the light. Okay, from the sunlight to comprehend any object. Okay, now going beyond that, like a microscope, you need another artificial light source in order to illuminate your device and can see through the lenses of the microscope. In some cases, okay, for a specialized microscope doing in the micron level, there is also use of coherent sources like laser and incoherent sources like UV or IR to get more details of your object. And of course, X-ray is also being used, okay, to get more details of your sample. This is especially true for in the industry that they want to see something greater detail, especially the structure of their electronic devices. Beyond this optical microscope, okay, because in the electromagnetic spectrum, we have the electrons. Okay, so electrons is being utilized just like light wave in order to stimulate the surface, okay, in order to get a signal. So just like in a light source, you have the source, the surface, you stimulate that, and that stimulation, okay, either it's a reflected light or photons, it's a reflected light or electrons, it gets into the detector and then processed by your computer. So that's how analysis works. Okay, you cannot analyze something without stimulating it. Let's say, for example, if there's no light, there's no sun, how can you see something? Okay, so that's why there's an external source to see something. So in this case, for a microscope, we use light to stimulate the surface. Now we use electrons to stimulate the surface. Now let's get into electron microscope. So what is an electron microscope? So this is where getting more. We're getting into the subject now. An electron microscope is basically similar to an optical microscope. Okay, because in an optical microscope we use light. Light is composed of photons, but in electron microscope we use electrons instead of photons. And because of that wave particle duality of the electron, it both behaves like a particle and a wave at the same time. You can manipulate this like an optical property. It has diffraction, chromatic aberration, spherical aberration, and also the resolution depends on the aperture and the wavelength produced by the electrons. So this is very similar to the optical microscope that you have lenses in order to focus the light on your sample and to adjust that focus in order to get more details. But in this case, in the electron microscope, instead of lenses, you have electromagnetic lenses. So electromagnetic lenses is just a coil, okay, electromagnet, which coils around it that supply current in order to control your electron beam focusing on your sample. So that's the main difference. Okay, in the structure they're very similar, but in electron microscope you use electrons instead of photons. You use electromagnetic lens, which is composed of magnets and coils, instead of lenses. Now, because of these differences, comparing electron microscope with the optical microscope, in the optical microscope we use the visible light. Okay, just like in your lab, if you want to see something in the laboratory, okay, you turn on the light of a microscope. You don't turn on the light, you won't see something. In the electron microscope, you use an electron beam. And in the electron microscope, you can see the actual color of your sample. But in an electron microscope, it's black and white because you only see the contrast. Because these are scattered electrons processed by the detector. And the best resolution you can get from an optical microscope is only around 2000x. Okay. And the resolution for the electron microscope is about 1 nanometers, about 200,000 magnification. In optical microscope, we use air. Okay, you just put the sample underneath the microscope, you see it. But in an electron microscope, everything works inside the vacuum. So this is a very critical feature of this machine. And as I mentioned before, in optical microscope, you use optical lenses. In electron microscope, uses electromagnetic lenses. And this way, you adjust the current in order to control the beam of electrons. While in optical microscope, you use the adjusting knob in order to focus and position your samples mechanically. Okay. So because of in general, you're using vacuum in order to operate an electron microscope. In general, it's not possible to analyze live specimen in a liquid state or in a liquid state for an electron microscope. And the specimen has to be prepared there. That's why in most biological samples, there is a special preparation technique in order for them to see the samples under this instrument. Yeah. Now, what are the big advantages of an electron microscope? You can see from these images, an optical microscope has a short depth of field. Electron microscope, because it is scanning along the surface, you can see the greater detail, including the background. And of course, the magnification of that for an electron microscope, you can reach up to 500,000x depending on the model of the instrument. Whereas for the optical microscope, you can reach only up to 1,400x, okay, using the optical lenses. So that's the big difference of that. Of course, as I mentioned before, in an optical microscope, you can see something live, but in an electron microscope, the sample has to be dead if it is a biological sample. Now, why electron? Why do you want to use electron? Because the resolution for electron microscope is derived from the Abbe's equation, which is related to the acceleration voltage. And the wavelength by electron, because of its wave particle duality, it's also related to the acceleration voltage. So these are derived from the scientists, Abbe and de Broglie. So just an example, a typical acceleration voltage for an electron microscope, 5,000 volts with at the 0.05 radian, okay, half angle of the objective lens. So we can see that the resolution for this type of electron microscope is about 0.2 nanometers, and its wavelength is about 0.0173 nanometer. Okay. So you just compare that with the wavelength of light, visible light, the one we utilize for microscope and naked eye, so 400 to 700 nanometers. So it's very small. So that's why, because of very, very small wavelength, you get a very small resolution and you get finer details. I've been talking about acceleration voltage. So what is acceleration voltage? So acceleration voltage is the a voltage which electrons accelerate. It's emitted from the electron gun and illuminate the specimen. So later I will show you that why most electron microscope has a certain column, okay, in its design, sometimes called the landing voltage. And when the electron passes to a potential, its kinetic energy is equal to the energy of the field. So that's why the energy in electron volts is the accelerating potential V. So this is the acceleration volts that we're talking to. So this is a very crucial parameter in controlling the images of an electron microscope. An electron microscope image is formed, okay, due to the electron-matter interaction on the surface. When an electron beam hits the surface, you have a lot of soup of different types of scattering or interactions happening. Then we have the secondary electrons. We also produce X-ray. We have backscattered electrons and we have the OJ electrons. Okay. And then some of the electrons escape through that passes. It becomes transmitted electrons. Others are elastically and inelastically scattered. So these electrons typically pass through a very thin samples, and these interactions can be seen through that's this interaction. The transmission is the one possible for creating transmission electron image. So that's why transmission electron, the scanning electron microscope, it's a surface analytical instrument, while the transmission electron microscope is a transmission analytical instrument. So that's why it's scanning, okay, the word scanning, because it scans on the surface. On that surface, the electron beam scans on the surface, and that scanning produces the interaction. When the electron beam hits the surface, it creates these different types of interactions and scattering. So that's the key point in generating image of electrons. So this part is on the surface and this part on the transmission. It's more like structure. So as I mentioned before, electron microscopes works only in vacuum. Why? Otherwise, electrons will be scattered and absorbed due to the collisions with air molecules. Okay, so that's why, as I mentioned before, it's not possible to image live or wet samples. And the vacuum is very crucial. So that's why these instruments has to be working 24. Has to be on. Turned on 24 hours, 24/7 in order to maintain its vacuum integrity. Now, electron microscopes, there are two types. One is the scanning electron microscopy, which will give into more details. The resolution is about 1.5 to 3 nanometers. And as mentioned before, this is surface features. Okay. And to study the morphology, and it's also good for material characterization. The second one, which is more complicated to operate and higher resolution, is this transmission electron microscope. So in the electron matter interaction, this is the one where electron passes through a thin material, and you can image the structure as well as the electron diffraction, which you can view the lattice structure of the material. So its resolution is far more smaller, which is 0.1, 0.2, higher resolution, mainly for the structure of the material and material characterization. Just to give you an idea, the electron microscope started way back in the discovery of electron by J.J. Thomson. And of course, de Broglie played a very crucial part here because of the particle wave dualism. Okay. So this electron microscopy is possible because of this principle. And it was in Hans Busch that electron beams can be focused by inhomogeneous magnetic field. This is where the electromagnetic lenses played the part. And this is how you control the electron beam. Actually, it was the transmission electron microscope was the first one to be developed prior to scanning electron microscope, because scanning electron microscope is the detector was not, I mean, solid state detectors was not developed in a not yet in 1931. It's for far later years. It was STEM that was first developed in 1931. They just used a phosphor film and to get an image. And it was only in 1938 that the first scanning electron microscope was developed by M. von Andeen. The first commercial scanning electron microscope came out only in 1960 by Cambridge Instrument. So you can see here that most instruments of the scanning electron microscope has a columnar structure. This is where the source of the electron beam that travels through all the way to the sample. There are various types of electron microscope. Okay, ones are the bench type, and then we have the tungsten tip, cold tip, which is a field emission, and the ultra high resolution, Schottky type, and sometimes some people claim that they can do a do-it-yourself SEM. And there's also we call ESEM, or environmental scanning electron microscope. So it uses a limited vapor pressure in the environment such that it's possible to analyze semi-wet samples. Okay, but the problem with this, of course, is that the resolution is has suffered because of that. So this is a semi-high. This is low vacuum. When you say low vacuum, it's not high. So there's some sort of pressure in the environment in order to allow you to magnify semi-wet samples. So we go into this scanning electron microscope working principle. Scanning electron microscope, okay, as I mentioned before, is very similar to optical microscope. You have the source, okay. Source in the optical microscope is a light. You have the electron source. Now this is where it gets different. Okay, the lenses here, you have the electromagnetic lenses to control the beam. Then instead of a mirror, we have here the detector. Okay, in the scanning electron microscope, okay, the beam passes hits the surface of material, and then this electron matter interaction produces several scattering, which is captured by the detector, and then you can produce this image. In the optical microscope, it's just purely light. Okay, that reflected light or the light being scattered can be checked by the detector and can be seen by the objective lens or the scope. Magnification in a scanning electron microscope is quite different compared to optical microscope. Okay. It's defined as a ratio of length measured of the SEM monitor. So, and to the length of the measured in the sample. So you say here that the length measured is usually a scale bar located at the lower right of the SEM monitor. So images in a scanning electron microscope really depends on the quality of the monitor, the size of the monitor. That's why in most images, when they supply to you in the scanning electron microscope, the scale bar is always there present. It's not really the magnification, because the scale bar really determines the resolution as well as the size of your relative size of your sample or the object. Now, I'll just show you a little video how does magnification and focusing works. Okay, so this is a zeolite sample. We magnified it. You can see from here, this is magnification based on the photo. And you can see the lower bar here. I'm talking about, this is the scale bar. So about 5 microns. So it's about 10,000 magnification based on this photo. So the zeolite, we increase up to 19,000x magnification. Okay, so 43,000x. So this, you can see the scale changed now. It's about 500 nanometer. So this is about 500 nanometer length. And now this is 200 nanometer length. So the scale here shows 200 nanometer length and the magnification is about 60,000x. So the zeolite, you can see it's just like a powder, but in detail, you can see it's just a composed of this tiny straw-like crystal structure. Okay, so this is an example of how this magnified image. On the left side, this is where the detector is. This is the where the detector, and this is the lens. Okay, the electromagnetic lens, so somewhere, and this is the sample holder. Now, in an electron microscope, there are two common detectors, which is this is actually the SEI and the BE. Okay, so what this stands for? Okay, some scanning electron microscope has numerous other detectors attached to them, but this is the most basic of them all. First is that the SE. So SE stands for secondary imaging. So the secondary imaging, these are scattered electrons that happens on the top of from the 1 to 50 nanometers from the surface. So this is an interaction volume. So when the electrons hits the surface, you have some kind of pear-shaped interaction volume on the material. Okay. Then this secondary electron imaging are due to inelastic scattering, that primary electrons that hits another electron, so you have this inelastic scattering. So this happens usually on the surface about 50 nanometers from the sample surface. So the imaging purposes of this is the surface. Okay, you want to see more details on the surface and morphology. The second one, the BE or BSE, is we call backscatter electron imaging. Okay, so this one, the interaction is about 300 nanometers from the surface, far more deeper. And because of this, okay, backscatter electrons happens because of the inelastic scattering. When you have a primary electron that is deflected or inelastically scattered due to the nucleus. So it means that higher atomic number provides higher reflectivity and brighter contrast. So this kind of method, backscatter electron, is for material contrast or identifying the difference between two materials when you are analyzing a microscope. So secondary electrons is for the surface. Backscatter electrons is for material contrast or material differentiation. Now, this is the difference between the backscatter image and the secondary image. In the secondary image, you can see a lot of these scratches, okay? The features on the surface. Okay? But in the backscatter image, you don't normally see these scratches anymore, but you can see that there's a dark portion on that, more visible, and then there's a lot of dark elements. So this is dark elements, okay? It has reflectivity. It just tells you that this material has lower atomic number compared to the white contrast, which has a higher atomic number. Similarly, in the image below, we can see from the we can see from the image here, the secondary image. Okay, there's a lot of scratches. Okay, and then you can see the features differently. And then here, in the backscatter image, we can see the material contrast. So you can see from here that this is lighter. It means it has a lighter atomic number. The darker, this is a darker, higher atomic number, so there are more reflectance. And here, this is darker. There's more transmission, so this is a lighter atomic number. So that's the difference between the two. Okay, this one is for analyzing the surface, and this one is for analyzing materials differences. Here we go again. We go back again to the Auger, the pear shape interaction volume. We can see that the incident electron, when it hits the surface, the topmost surface, this is where the interaction for the secondary electrons, and this is the OJ. And there is a such thing as Auger electron microscope. This is specially used for analyzing the surfaces about 5 to 10 angstroms in thickness. And then as you go back deeper, okay, this is the backscattered electrons, and far deeper is this the continuum of X-rays and fluorescence X-rays. In here, in the much deeper surfaces around 5 microns, you can see the characteristics X-ray. This is where the energy dispersive X-ray spectrometer works. Okay, because of that interaction, as the higher electron accelerated electrons with more energy penetrating the surface, it releases X-rays. So these X-rays are very important for identifying elements of that material. Now, let's see how does this interaction volume affect the image. So we have different types of acceleration voltage to surface. Low accelerating voltage, we have the PKV. This is a raw zeolite. We can see perfectly that there's like a powder. This is image at 1000x magnification. And you can see there's powders, and then the surface is quite rough. We increase the voltage to 5,000 kilovolts, 5 to 7,000 volts. And this is range on the medium accelerating voltage. Okay, so the acceleration voltage, because of the energy of the electrons is higher this time, it penetrates further. So what does that penetration do to that image? So you can see here, okay, you have a lot of bright spots. Okay, electrons tend to trap on the surfaces, so create some sort of charging. So this is creating brighter contrast, and at the same time you can see a lot more details beneath. Okay, beneath this. Okay, so that's the main difference. You get more details at 5 kb. Okay, on the subsurface, but this one you get more details on the surface itself. But if you go, okay, higher acceleration voltage, so electrons has more energy, right? It penetrates more on the surface, so in the interaction volume becomes very deep. Okay, so this time it also produces characteristic X-rays. So what happens then to the image? You can see from here, okay, compared to 5 kb, the image becomes smooth. Okay, and there's a dark portion and light portion. So the dark portion is where the electrons penetrates farther, and then the light portions are then reflected. And you can see here, okay, from this surface here, okay, now that surface is gone. Okay, it means the electrons penetrate deeper. Okay, it shows you the deep portion of that sample. longer. So that's how acceleration voltage affects the sample. So you use higher acceleration voltage, the electrons gets more energy, and then it penetrates more on the surface, and then the images of your sample changes. Now for microscopic trivia, just like to ask you, okay, so can anybody guess what's this? Anybody? Okay, a hint. It's just like a carbon. I mean, it's used every day when you want to write something. Okay. Okay. This is it's a pencil. Okay. So you can see it's the tip of the pencil at 5 microns. Okay. So it's composed of these finer structures put together. Okay. Now we go on to the next topic, which is the energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, or EDS. Sometimes some people call it EDS, EDX, but they're all the same. So EDS is a vital instrument of an scanning electron microscope. So it's usually located protruding just beside the column. So it allows you quick elemental identification, and it's a quantitative qualitative technique which gives a composition of your material, something that's greater than atomic number greater than Z. So how it works is that you have a primary electron. So this electron got snacks off or raised to a higher energy level. And then the other electrons from the other shell, okay, actually this is an electron from another one, yeah, see this vacancy and goes to that vacancy. And that vacancy, when that electron goes to that relaxes, it produces emission of spontaneous emission of X-ray. So these are characteristic X-rays. And that characteristic X-rays is used by the principle of EDS to identify your elements, because each material has its own distinct structure, atomic structure. So that's why it has a different way to show its characteristics X-rays. And that characteristics X-rays is just like a fingerprint to show which element is which. Okay, it identifies the elements. An electron scanning, an EDS is a simple. This is the structure of this EDS. Okay, a simplified diagram. So you have an electron source, and that beam hits a sample, as I said before, because of the electron matter interaction that produces X-ray, and these X-ray are collected by a detector. And this detector are amplified and processed to a computer, and then you get a EDS spectrum. So this is particularly useful only for organic materials and the like, metals, something like that. So what are the advantages of the EDS? So it has a good analytical range. It's a very high efficient X-ray collection. And analysis is a very fast. It can show you a lot of details at the same time. And then resolution is dependent on the energy. That means you need to have a higher energy acceleration voltage in order to produce more ionization, so that you get a lot of elements. Okay, but this is a limited that can only be used from beryllium 4 or up. Okay, but you cannot see hydrogen elements because of it's not possible to see that because of the very light atomic number. So this is just a quick view of an EDS to show you. So the same zeolite. Okay, I use 20,000 volts, and you can see elements are automatically shown in the spectrum as well as the breakdown. Okay. So this is the spectrum. Okay, this is the target, and this is the elements. So this is the breakdown. So it's a very quick way to see the details of your element. Okay, but of course these things has disadvantages. It just gives you a quick way to show an elements. But if you want to further analyze the material, okay, you have to do other analytical techniques. Okay, it's not a do all end all solution. And this is an example of elemental mapping. So actually the two types of that's one is a point mapping, and also it can do elemental mapping. So when I say elemental mapping, a sample, okay, it can be analyzed in a certain area, selected area, and then from that area you can have the breakdown of the elements coming on, like silicon, potassium, calcium, and the oxygen. At the same time, also show your the spectrum of that one. I didn't show a video of this one, but because elemental mapping takes a long time, about 30 minutes to do. Okay. So, but these are the common things for scanning electron microscope, EDS, point analysis and elemental mapping. EDX is a ratio needs what you call overvoltage. Okay, overvoltage is the ratio of beam energy to ionization energy. That means you need to use a higher acceleration voltage in order to get elements to identify more elements. In practice, the ratio should be 2 in order to detect minor elements. A higher overvoltage, I mean 3 or 4 something, it will degrade the spatial resolution. So just an example, let's say if we in the table, if we have a gold, ionization energy is 9.7 kilovolts. So if I'm going to use 15 kilovolts acceleration voltage, so that's enough. It's about ratio about 1.5, or it should be, if I want to get more details, I use 20 kb to approach 2. Okay. So what does this overvoltage affect? Okay, you can see from here, acceleration voltage, if I use only 3 kV, at a certain point, I see less elements. It's barely hard to identify what are these. Okay, so in the basic periodic table, won't see anything at all. If I increase the acceleration voltage higher to 15 kb, so the same material, you can see a lot of elements sprouting out from the spectrum. So you can identify a lot of elements. It can even see the sputter coating on that material, the platinum. So that's the difference between two acceleration voltage. So that's what over voltage ratio does. So that's why when somebody gives us a sample, I always ask them that, is your sample really going to be is expendable? Because most samples for scanning electron microscopes are destructive. So once you put that inside the scanning electron microscope, it's going to be damaged. Okay, it's not going to be the same. Okay, one way or another is going to be damaged. Especially if it is biological sample, it has to be dried, and it's going to be damaged as well, because you're using a high energy electrons in order to get information. And acceleration voltage and also the EDS, energy dispersive spectrometer, also depends on the material density. Okay, so this is called the Castaing's formula. Let's say, for example, take iron. So an iron has a ionization energy about 6.39 electron volts, and then this is iron. This is the density of iron. So if we use an acceleration voltage about 20 kilovolts, and then this is the emission voltage about 6.3. then we can see that the analytical depth is around 1 micron. Okay, so you use a higher acceleration voltage, analytical depth will become deeper. So it depends on the density of your material. So this is illustrated in this next image. Okay, in a sample like this, a 5 kilovolt with a probe current of a 40 nanometer, you can see the details of the mapping. But when you increase the acceleration voltage to 15 kb further, you can see that the spatial resolution is now affected. So you won't get, a good resolution of the images. So that's why it's very important also to know the density of your sample. So there are some issues during scanning electron microscope, like charge accumulation and damage due to electron beam. Like I said, it is a destructive analysis. Electrons accumulate on your sample, especially if this is a non-conducting sample like polymers, okay, or insulators, such that electrons will accumulate on the surface. So when these electrons accumulate on the surface, you have like charges with an electron beam. So the electron beam is deflected. You have image distortion. So that's the consequences of that. Okay, so this is a one type of a polymer that we use a higher acceleration, even at this is about 1000 volts only, and we can see that image distortion already. So this is black and white. Okay, so you never know if this image is correct or not, because this is distorted. So the beam is distortion happens when the beam is deflected or reflected, so you don't get an actual image of your sample. So there are three common ways to eliminate charging on the sample. One is a sputter coating with carbon or metals like gold, platinum, gold palladium. Adjust acceleration voltage and probe current, and could create a conductive pathway on the surface of the specimen using tape, EDS. So this is how this sputter happens. So this is a magnetum type sputter coater, which was shown before by Dr. Camacho. We have this sputter here. We have the platinum target. So this one creates a plasma. So this plasma creates sputtering that coats the sample. So what happens here is that you have a non-conducting sample, and this conducting element is coated on your sample. So you have some sort of conductive path to ground. Electron beams, those electrons, excess electrons, will go to the ground, such way that you don't create too many electrons on the surface, such a way that the beams are deflected. Just like we have mentioned before, like charges deflects. So that's why it is very important that samples must be coated or properly prepared in order to prevent image distortion. So this is an example of uncoated sample. So this is an same raw zeolite from a different sample, uncoated. So you can see from here the dark portions as well as the bright contrast. Okay, so some here are reflected, some here are absorbed. Okay, so there's an uneven contrast on the surface. Likewise, for a coated sample with the platinum, you can see a uniform image, okay, with a good contrast, brightness and contrast mixture. So that's the big difference. So this is only a low acceleration voltage. If you use a higher acceleration voltage, image will be you won't see any image. You just see a noise or a distortion, okay, or something like distorted cartoon-like image. of course, one of the consequences is that some materials, especially if there are outgas or contaminants itself, during scanning, this can cause carbonaceous deposits. These carbonaceous deposits creates some sort of dark pattern or burnt mark. In SEM, they commonly call it burnt, SEM burn. So, but actually these are carbonaceous deposits accumulating on the surface. So these are caused by outgas from the specimen, or they're outgas from the instrument itself. That's why it's very important that samples has to be prepared, well prepared, in order to prevent this kind of problem. And of course, as I said before, because of the high acceleration vortex, high energy electrons, you tend to create more damage on the surfaces. Okay, so you can see this circular square and these things. These are the scan lines of the electrons. Okay, so if you use a focus at a certain area at high electron volt, so you can see, okay, these squares produced during focusing. So that's why it depends on the scanning time. The longer I spend, okay, on the sample, on the surface, so you get more damage on that element. So that's why in a scanning electron microscope, especially for very sensitive materials, it is very important that samples, okay, and I mean, for the perspective of the or the ones that being sampled, it's very important to know that the sample is destructive or not. Okay, and also if the sample is non-conductive or conductive, this is where we apply coating. Sometimes most asking for for analysis, they will say conductive. Okay, conductive in a way, it's not really. I mean, like for example, even for carbon samples, they're conductive in a way, if we, in a linear way, but the surface resistivity is still very high for carbon. It's about 1 mega ohms. So that's why for that kind of material, it's really still important to coat that with the metal in order to mitigate sample charge up or image distortion. So we go to the different applications of SEM. So you can see from here, when you type Google application SEM, you have about how many different applications are being discussed about scanning electron microscope. Scanning electron microscope is a very versatile tool. Okay, it's almost used in every aspects of science. But because of it's very expensive, not all laboratory can afford it. So that's why it's seldom being used in some of the analysis. But there are a lot of labs right now that accommodates collaboration and sample submission that others can use this for analysis. So one type of application is very well known when I was still in the electronic industry, is used for failure analysis. If you're well known about the hard drive before the SSD came in, you know that in a PC contains a hard drive in the old ones, and then you have this platter and the headstock assembly. And this assembly contains this head gimbal assembly. You can see how it compared to a 1 peso coin. And then this point here, they have the so-called slider. That's where your sensor is located. And the sensor here and the blue square is like the writer and reader area. And then this writer and reader area is where the magnetoresistive sensor is located and can only be seen at 50,000 x magnification. And that sensor can only be viewed at 600,000 x magnification. So this is where failure analysis is used for scanning electron microscope. So it's only here that optical microscope is used, and beyond this one, we go to electron microscope. And of course, one of my topics when I was in the industry is electrostatic discharge. Scanning electron microscope is very useful tool. In fact, it's one of the only tools in order to analyze the ESD damage of integrated circuits. Otherwise, it's not easy to, like for example here, it's not very easy to see or discern how this damage or the extent of damage only using an optical microscope. Okay, so at this very small scale, it's about 6 microns. This is the only way to see and analyze your product, how it failed using scanning electron microscope. This one is one of the environmental studies in pollutants. This is one of part for the sustainability, which we have reported before. This is a related report by Lee et al. So in the environmental studies, they collected the haze, okay, from different parts of the cities using a special dish, and then they collected this for several days and then used an scanning electron microscope to identify these materials. So you can see there's different shapes and determines how this haze, okay, affects our environment as well as, of course, our health. And of course, for biological science, scanning electron microscope is very useful. So this is a red ant, okay? So from the ant, actually, and then you can see the eye here and also the whiskers of the ant. And another one is an example for biological samples, the surface of termite wing. So this is a surface of a termite wing. You have this, you see these whiskers, and magnified further, you can see these single whiskers with a lot of dot pattern, and that pattern is further magnified. You can see it in here. And of course, these samples has to be dried and coated with the platinum. And also lately, scanning electron microscope, like in other countries, that's being used for forensic science to know the ballistics of the bullet. Because in ballistics, every firearm has a very unique signature, especially when the striker, the firing pin hits the base of the ammunition, so it creates a very unique pattern. So no single fire pin is similar in structure. So this signature is very important for determining the ballistics. So it can be traced back which firearms it came from. And of course, powder residues coming from the gun can also be analyzed using a scanning electron microscope, using special techniques used in the other countries for collecting these residues. So this is a very useful for going deeper into crime scenes and trying to catch the criminals or the culprits of this scene. So as a summary, scanning electron microscope, or SEM, is an instrument that uses electrons to excite materials in order to generate high resolution image. Its magnification is many orders higher in superior depth field compared to optical microscope. And however, it has a few disadvantages, as it needs high vacuum, costly to operate, and it's not possible to view live specimens. And it's a versatile instrument, found its way in many research, including solid-state physics, biology, and chemistry. Thank you very much for this one.
All right. Maraming salamat po, Sir Jojo, for the very comprehensive discussion of scanning electron microscopy and EDS. Okay, and we're joined by, teka, ano ko lang po, ipin ko lang tayong apat. So we're joined by Ana Karen Lacerna again from PhilSci Hub and DLSU CIF. We're also joined by GP Onya, dialing all the way in from Finland, and yours truly. So sir, before tayo dumako dun sa question and answer portion, inom muna kayo ng tubig, sir. So I'll just go yeah, I'll just go through some
Okay.
reminders, no? So because we have a number of events during the month of October. So ayun. So mag-share lang muna ako ng screen, and then siguro we'll have JP and Karen course through the Q&A. Kayo na lang yung magbato kay sir maya-maya. Alright. Okay. Nakita niyo ba ang screen ko?
Yep.
Okay, so after this po, next Saturday, we are gonna be joined by Dr. Ted Novitsky. So, Dr. Ted Novitsky is a scientist from PPG Industries Incorporated. So, PPG is one of the world's biggest oil and paints company. So, he will be sharing with you a webinar titled The Science of Protecting and Beautifying the World with Paints and Coating. So, Dr. Ted Novitsky is one of the world experts when it comes to oil and paints formulation, I believe. So, this is actually one of the first, if not the first time na magkakaroon po tayo ng industrial scientist sharing about the field of paints and coatings. So, watch out for that po. And then, as we have mentioned, so ito pong session natin ngayon with Sir Jojo Esmeria is the second installment of the PhilSci Hub and DLSU CIF webinar series on modern analytical methods. So after po nito on November 27th, we'll have Dr. Virgilio Ebajo. He'll talk about nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy and its application in natural product research. December 4th po, multi-species cytogenetic analysis by Mr. Michael Arnante. And then last but not the least, by our very dear Dr. Ana Karen Lacerna. On January 15th po, she'll talk about liquid chromatography, instrumentation, and applications in natural products research. So watch out for all these, for all the upcoming installments po of this webinar series. And then for the month of October po, in addition to Dr. Novitsky's talk, on October 23rd is the very first PhilSci Hub Math webinar. So we'll have Dr. Neil Ergargin from the Institute of Mathematical Sciences and Physics of the University of the Philippines in Los Baños, and he'll talk about maths in action. So controlling sound and electromagnetic waves. And then last but not the least po is going to be the final installment of the Fuse PNU and PhilSci Hub teacher training series. And this time around, Dr. Analet Carrasco and Mr. JP Onya will deliver essentially a crash course on the fundamentals of research teaching at the basic education level. So that's going to be on October 30th po. So watch out for these events. And then we also have a number of events for the months of November and December. So, punta lang po kayo dun sa website natin sa www.philscihub.com to register to all these events, and then for further announcements. So, all these events are also posted po on our official Facebook page. Alright. Sir Jojo, Karen, and JP, are you guys ready para sa question and answer?
Yep.
So we have a few questions, and there may have been a few more that trickled in during the announcements. Okay.
Ayan. So, just to start the ball rolling, no? Ang kauna-unahan nating question is from YouTube, and somebody asked how much is an electron microscope. Siguro for the benefit of those facilities who plan to buy a unit. No, sir. So, but can you give like an estimate on how much one assembly of electron microscope cost?
Okay. Thank you, Sir Jay. An electron microscope, okay, depends on the features you want to see it. But the basic one, like for example, scanning electron microscope, costs about $150,000. Okay. Bench type is about $60,000, like that. The small ones that you can put in the bench. The other one, the transmission electron microscope, that one costs about $1 million.
Okay. So sir, ano po, yung sinabi mo, yung una was $60,000, that's 3 million. So
3 million. Yep.
That's bench.
Yeah.
And then yung 150,000 po, which is essentially 7.5 million pesos.
Yeah.
Which one po yun?
Yeah, that's the basic scanning electron microscope. I mean, that's one complete one with the chamber, with the separator workstation like that.
And the
But
$1 million,
yeah.
So $1 million is almost 50 million pesos.
Yeah, that's for the transmission electron microscope.
TEM.
Yeah, TEM.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Ma'am Karen, maybe you can take this one.
Okay, Dr. Jojo, so the second question is from our Zoom participants. So may I ask, what is the appropriate magnification needed in analyzing samples when you want to know its 1 to 10 nanometer structure diameter?
Okay. For this kind of analysis, 1 to 10 nanometer, that's beyond the scope of the scanning electron microscope. So you have to go to the level of transmission electron microscope. So in this case, it's about 600 to 800,000 X. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, another question from Zoom. In the EDS, can you set what particular elements to be analyzed?
You mean you want to set if you want to target a certain element? Is that the question?
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah.
Okay. In the EDS, because it's an electron beam hitting on the surface, so you get this X-rays. Okay. So if your sample is not homogeneous, okay, you get a number of elements coming out from that. Okay. But of course, if you let's say for example, if your target is carbon and then you have a sample that is embedded on a particular material, you can see the carbon itself. Okay. But if your material is purely homogeneous, you can see a particular element. But if it's not, you will see a simultaneous elements coming out. Okay.
Kasi it's more of a surface analysis po eh, no?
Yeah. Because of that electron matter interaction, that you have characteristics X-ray. So this X-ray is coming out from your sample.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I hope it answered the question.
Okay, sir. Sunod is, can we use EDS in determining the presence of gold in mineral ores?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's possible. As long as that sample is properly prepared.
Okay, so yung sa mga mineralogists, geologists, and yung mga may natatagong ginto dyan, so pwede nyo pong padala ang sample nyo sa DLSU CIF po.
Yeah. Okay.
So another question from YouTube. Which is better, SEM or AFM? I think AFM is atomic force microscopy.
Okay. AFM and SEM are two different things. Okay. So just like comparing apples to oranges. AFM is a technique that wherein you have a very fine point. Okay. A cantilever and a point scanning on the surface, and it reacts on the interaction between the forces of that surface and the tip. Okay, so in the AFM you get a finer details on the surface of the morphology, especially the height. In the SEM, it's not. It's more like an interaction. So which is better? If you want to know the details of the surface, I mean the height, especially the Z height of the surface, you go for AFM. Okay. But in AFM, the disadvantage, you won't know what elements are therein, unlike in SEM. In SEM, you can see, okay, I use this detector. There's a difference in that material. I can use EDS to get the elemental composition. In AFM, you cannot do that. And in AFM, you can only see a very, very small portion of your sample, about 1 square microns. Unlike in SEM, you can see a lot bigger. So that's the difference. Yeah, cannot compare the two.
Okay, and I think it depends largely on your application, no? So
it is.
Talagang i-determine natin yung fitness for purpose nung ating choice of instrumentation.
Yeah. So that's magkaiba talaga yung dalawa.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So from our Zoom participants uli, can the sample be recovered and used to other purposes once analyzed using SEM? So I think, sir, you also mentioned earlier, no? So it's more of a destructive technique ang SEM. So if you can expound on that.
Uh, in my opinion, no. Cannot recover. Once you get that sample there, okay, that's it. Okay, you put a death sentence on that sample already. You cannot do that. Especially like, for example, I mentioned the AFM and SEM. Once you do an SEM on a sample, you cannot do any more AFM. You cannot see anything. Because that sample, because of that electron beam interaction, you create a lot of in rough surfaces already. So it's not. Yeah, that's my opinion. It's a final destination.
And I think especially if you are spotter coating it, no?
Yeah.
Yun.
Yeah.
So another question from Zoom. We often see colored electron micrographs in books. How are these images produced?
These are special softwares or options to produce false coloring of your sample.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's no such thing as colored SEM, so you just get a black and white. So you have this software to give you a better contrast. So in order to get a better distinction of your sample. Kasi lalo na parang pag tumitingin ka sa SEM, parang colorblind ka eh. Wala, black and white na lang nakikita. Yeah.
Ayun, thank you for that question.
Okay, sir, from our Zoom participants uli, other than the acceleration voltage, what are the critical parameters that should be controlled and considered to provide a more accurate results in electron microscopy?
Oh, that's many.
Oh, sir, no.
Okay. I just mentioned the basic acceleration voltage, but there are, of course, working distance, probe current, and of course, the how you samples are properly prepared. Okay, the astigmatism, focusing, brightness, contrast, so forth and so on. Maraming parameters yan eh. Kasi when you're operating a SEM, para ka nagda-drive niyan ng manual, no? Kasi you have to, parang stick shift, you have to feel, no? Kung kailan tataas yung revolution and you shift to the next gear. So ganun din yung sa SEM. So when you're doing a SEM, when you're focusing on something, pagka lumalabo, parang okay, adjust ko naman yung working distance ko, adjust ko yung probe current ko, adjust ko yung acceleration voltage ko, parang ganun. Yan.
Okay
Ayun.
So yun, JP.
So do we still have more questions in Zoom?
Yeah, I was actually trying to capture more into the slides, but okay, this is the next one.
Yep. What is the acceptable acceleration voltage that may be used in analyzing organic samples like carbon nanomaterials?
Okay, in my experience in the lab, like analyzing carbons, if it is coated, the best acceleration voltage I recommend in our SEM, kasi magkakaiba yung mga instrument, we use about 3,000 volts to 5,000 volts. Yeah.
Okay, so 3,000 volts to 5,000 volts. Siguro, sir, follow-up question lang, from someone sa Zoom. Hindi babago lang to.
Okay. Yeah.
So the question says, can we use SEM both for organic and inorganic samples? Then how about AFM? So.
Yes, you can. You can for organic, inorganic. For organic samples, as I said before, as I mentioned, there is a special preparation for that. No, so it has to be dry, has to be devoid of moisture. Okay, and after that, it has to be coated in order to get a good imaging contrast. Yun siya.
All right. Okay. So I have a few more questions captured. So let me reshare my screen. Okay. Just a sec. All right, there.
Ma'am Karen, will you do the honors?
From our Zoom participants, if the sample is needed to be dried to analyze, what is the common preparation practice for wet samples, for example, of phytoplankton? So, siguro po, in terms of like drying, ano po yung mas suitable? Do you need to like freeze dry or to nitrogen dry or oven dry? Ano po ba yung mas suitable, sir?
One of the most common things to use is freeze drying, ginagamit nila. So that's common. Other than that, also, yung as I mentioned before, there's a so-called yung cryosem that they freeze dry this cryo state in order to analyze it in that state also. And then also, yung merong ang yung pinaka-common yung freeze drying, no? And then other one also, yung may mga laboratories. So I don't know if we have here in the Philippines yung environmental SEM. As I mentioned before, meron yung parang limited vapor pressure in the chamber, low vacuum siya that you can use for these biological samples. Yun. Kaya lang kasi I'm not biology, so I don't know kung how freeze dried is good for your samples. We have to experiment on that one.
All right. Sir, we really have a highly engaged audience. So ngayon, ang dami pang mga questions.
So para kang nagbukas ng pintuan. I'm just
and we had a total of about 260 plus live participants, by the way, sir. So it's just
okay.
Okay. So a question from Maria Elenita de Castro.
Yeah.
Some experts believe that in the analysis of heavy metals in plant tissues, ESEM is better than conventional SEM. What's your opinion about this?
Yeah, as I mentioned regarding ESEM, kasi ano siya environmental SEM, low vacuum kasi siya. So the advantages of this SEM is that you can operate at higher pressure. So pagka higher pressure siya, so that means yung sample mo could be semi-wet or there's a moisture present on that sample. Pwede mo siyang i-analyze ng that. No, for those mga ganyang klaseng typical samples, yun ang advantages ng environmental SEM.
And siguro, sir, we can entertain a couple more questions now.
Okay.
The rest of time. Ito naman question from Zoom. So what is the quantity of samples to be analyzed in the SEM? So siguro po ito, they just want to have an idea like how much samples to send to you if SEM po yung analysis na kailangan nila.
Okay, an SEM, a typical chamber niyan, maliit lang yan eh. So let's say for example a powder sample is less than a milligram is enough for you to send a sample for us. Kasi size of the SEM chamber, particularly about 5 millimeter in height, about 1 centimeter square is enough. I mean, is more than enough for that. Yun. Kasi gusto mo i-focus lang in certain area mo eh. So those sizes are typical for that scanning electron microscope.
Opo. Okay. Siguro ito, one very quick question lang. This is perhaps like a yes/no question, no? Napansin ko lang to. So question for everyone from CIF siguro. Does De La Salle University raw have Raman spectroscopy?
Okay. Sir, so far wala pa. Tama, Sir Doc Jojo, no? Pagkakaalam ko, wala pa. And I'm not sure. Hopefully, maybe in the future, we will also get one Raman spectrometer. But yeah, so far, not yet.
Okay. And then siguro, we can cap this session with this question. JP, would you like to do the honors, please?
Ayan. I wonder who this question came from. Hello, sir. Thank you for your lecture. I'm a BS biology major in microbiology studies. What academic programs can I pursue to work with electron microscopes here in the Philippines?
Okay. Actually, electron microscopy is a special topic in physics, but for other sciences, this is a tool. Okay, a tool just like a hammer, nail, hammer, saw, something. You work on microbiology. That's my best guess. No? I don't know about career programs, but if you work on something like microbiology or virology, you get to work more on electron microscopes, because these things, you need these instruments in order to analyze your very minute samples like that. Especially virology. No, yung mga COVID-19. So pag COVID-19 talaga, hindi mo makita ng ng SEM yan. You have to go to transmission electron microscope. Far better than that.
And siguro going back din kanina po dun sa overview presentation ni Sir Drex, no? He talked about yung collaboration opportunities sa University CIF. So
and internships.
Yeah, so even if perhaps sa graduate program nyo or sa current undergraduate program nyo, kung wala kayong facility sa school nyo, perhaps it's also possible for you to come up with a research topic that would, necessitate the use of SEM or electron microscopes, and then out and collaborate with De La Salle University.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, tama.
Ayun. Okay, so that's a very great question. So we apologize po if we were not able to entertain some of the other questions, kasi ayaw din naman nating masakop talaga ang lunchtime ng ating pong teachers. Siguro po, and then with this, I'd like to ask for JP to actually do the honors of presenting this to Sir.
Ayan. So in behalf of PhilSci Hub team and everybody, all the participants here on Zoom and on YouTube, we would like to present the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Jose Esmeria Jr. For delivering the webinar Fundamentals of Scanning Electron Microscopy, organized by the Filipino Science Hub and held via Zoom and YouTube Live on this 9th day of October 2021. Signed, Dr. Jeffrey Bongkin, our CEO and founder, and yours truly, Vice President PhilSci Hub. So ayan, maraming salamat po, sir, for your time and your very comprehensive discussion on scanning electron microscopy.
Thank you, Doc Jojo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So ito is inano ko na, shinare ko na yung link for the certificate issuance.
All right.
So ayun po.
Ay, halos sakto.
Kindly check if it works.
Sakto tayo sa 12 noon, Sir Jojo. Maraming salamat po. And,
okay, thank you.
Para po dun sa mga nagtatanong na nanghihingi po ng kopya ng presentation. So, this session is recorded po and uploaded po on PhilSci Hub's YouTube channel rin. So, if in case gusto nyo pong balikan or ipapanood sa mga estudyante nyo, idirekta nyo na lang po sila na panoorin ron. And the good thing about recorded webinars is that merong replay. So, hindi yung slides lang yung mapapakita nyo. So, kumbaga, your students and your fellow teachers will get to experience yung lecture ni Sir Jojo, with him really speaking on the contents that he had curated. So, ayun po. Muli, maraming salamat po sa inyong pagsama sa amin. Meron po ulit tayong session on tomorrow. Meron po ulit tayong next Saturday. Sorry po, medyo gabi na. It's almost midnight. Anyway po, at 1 p.m. this afternoon, we will have the premiere of our undergraduate student led podcast called SciTalk. So for at 1 p.m. po, our first episode is titled is focusing on how to transition from high school to college. And specializing in STEM. So kung meron po kayong mga estudyante na medyo nalilito paano ba yung proseso ng pagpili ng specialization, we have a fairly good panel of speakers dun po sa video podcast na yan. So tune in po. Lunch lang po kayo at 1 p.m. Balik po kayo. We'll be streaming it live on our Facebook channel. So kita-kits po tayo dun. Muli, Sir Jojo, maraming salamat po.
Karen, thank you also.
For being with us again. You have like this dual involvement in organizations. Thank you so much. And then JP, si JP on na po.
Yep.
Maagang na namang nagising.
Oo nga magdi-daylight saving na naman.
Ayun. So, magkita-kita po uli tayo sa susunod pong linggo para po sa sunod natin na webinar with Ted Novitsky. About paints and coatings, and then at 1 p.m. today, SciTalk, PhilSci Hub, Facebook page. Maraming salamat po at
thank you.
Siguro,
thank you YouTube participants.
So, invite po namin kasi very quick lang po na debrief in a
Yeah,
second.
okay. Thank you.
Aaron and JP. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.